Okay, great, thank you. So DAOs today, as I've mentioned a couple of times already, are at a dead end, right? And what I'll talk about here in some more detail is basically some new principles and some new technologies and new ideas that we could start with if we have the goal of trying to figure out how do we fix this. So basically, what might the next generation of DAOs that are implemented in a completely new way actually look like, right? So maybe we could start from some goals, right? So basically, what do we need DAOs for? And I think of this as being split up between two things, right? So you can use DAOs to run short-term projects, so basically things that are fairly time-limited, things that are fairly tightly scoped, where you do a thing and the thing gets done. And I think these use cases are really good, and generally, things that can be done in that format should be done in that format. But if you have that, then generally the solution is just use a multisig, right? Basically, a lot of the time, one of the big findings I think is that 80% of the problem is communication and 20% of the problem is formal governance. And so if you can avoid having complicated formal governance, then you just do a multisig and then you try to solve everything else by communication, right? So I think this is kind of the first pass, right? But then beyond that, the other type of thing that we need DAOs for is governing resources that need some kind of a long-term stability guarantee, right? So who here uses ENS? Who here would feel happy if 6 months from now, ENS token holders decided that because it makes them a greater profit, suddenly some corporation, I don't know, pick one, a government, I don't know, the Solana Foundation, gets the right to just reassign your name to the highest bidder. 0 raised hands, right? Okay. What if it's the Bitcoin Foundation? What if it's the Optimism Foundation? What if it's the Ethereum Foundation? Okay, see, so we want is you want stability guarantees, right? You want the guarantee that if you have a domain, your domain continues to be yours. We would also want other kinds of stability guarantees that are sometimes more complicated, right? So who here holds any kind of algorithmic stablecoin? Who here has a position in a DeFi protocol? Who here would just love it if some company decided that it's profitable, they could just make the Oracle value set it to 99999 and all your money goes to 0. Okay. So things require long-term stability guarantees. We could give some examples. So funding projects aligned with some mission is one thing that DAOs can get used for, right? And so we've seen Optimism retro funding, we've seen the Gitcoin DAO, we've seen lots of major project DAOs have grant programs, and generally if a project has a token, they generally have a goal that they want to distribute the token widely and at the same time distribute the token to people who have actually been helpful to the project. So that's one example, right? And I think funding is a very interesting sub-problem for some reasons that I'll talk about. In some ways it's harder and in other ways it's easier. Then maintaining inputs to an oracle is another one, right? So if you want to have an algorithmic stablecoin, you'd want the USD to ETH price, or if you want the stablecoin to track something other than than USD, you would need an oracle for that. An arbitration system, so something like Kleros, even answer resolution in a prediction market would be one example. Decisions on protocol changes, so if you have an L2, and then the L2 is upgrading its rules, and then that requires some kind of mechanism. running a city, just to give a fun one, if we can make DAOs work, then like a city is also a thing where people who live there want long-term stability guarantees. So lots of different things that people could potentially use DAOs for. One of the generators that I've used to think about different modes in which that some of these use cases have is this question, are they convex or concave, right? And basically the difference between our convex and concave is basically, is on average a compromise better or worse than a coin flip, right? And actually, there are plenty of examples that are on both sides, right? So for example, if you have a building and you want to make sure that the building doesn't catch fire, and let's say you have two options. One of them is you pay $200,000 a year for one person over here to organize the process of making sure that things are not flammable. And then another option is you pay $200,000 a year for a person over here to organize that. Compromise would be, well, you pay each of them $100,000 a year, right? Now, and then coin flip is, well, you flip one or the other. Now, problem is, what if one of these people just turns out to just completely disappear on you, or just knows nothing about fire, or just does completely the wrong thing, right? Probably giving someone only half the resources is actually going to lead to, not the best outcome, but it's less than half as bad as leaving the problem ignored completely, right? And a lot of public goods funding is like that, right? Software development also, if they give you two choices, reduce funding to all Ethereum clients by 50%, and then the other option is coin flip between reduce it by 0% and reduce it by 100%. Who here would choose the coin flip? Okay, none, right? Now, the other option is, well, when is coin flip better than compromise, right? And I think one example here would be art, right? So imagine, or even you're writing a book, and or let's say you want a book to be written. And one option is that one author writes it, the other option is the other author writes it, and then a third option is, well, they have to play rock, paper, scissors, one word at a time, right? Maybe some of you would actually want that just for the novelty value, right? But on average, that doesn't give good books, right? It's basically, there's lots of categories of decisions where if you sort of take half of everything, then you end up getting a worse outcome, right? And one of the general principles I think is I think on average more things tends to be concave, so compromises tends to be better, but convex things also exist. And generally things that are convex are things where you need some kind of more centralized layer in the decision making, and things that are concave are things where you can just do without the centralized layer entirely. So that's one point. Now, here's one interesting issue, phase transitions. So let's say you have an algorithmic stablecoin, and let's say your algorithmic stablecoin is tracking the US dollar. And let's say at some point, the US dollar hyperinflates. At some point, the gold bugs are right, inflation hits 100%, then it hits 1,000, then it hits 10 million%, and the US dollar starts totally collapsing. Chances are the users of that stablecoin would prefer the stablecoin starts doing something other than tracking an index that has become totally useless, right? And so it would actually be cool if in that extreme situation, the DAO could basically execute on some kind of phase transition, and then while it's in the phase transition, the task actually flips from being concave to being convex. Basically, it flips from being a situation where